Good morning, everyone. I am Kyle Constant, Digital Services Librarian at Trails Regional Library, and we are going to be doing another online training this morning. Today, we're going to be talking about Ancestry Library Edition. Ancestry is a little bit unique from the other services that we've been using or been training on in that it is in-library use only. I want to start off by showing you all what our patrons will see when they try to access this from home, just so that you have an idea where they're coming from, because you won't see this if someone is coming to you or calling, probably more likely calling and trying to access it and saying, I'm having issues. You won't be able to see this from the library, because what it does is it recognizes which computers are library computers and it automatically gives them access. Whereas if they're from home, then they won't be able to access Ancestry Library Edition through our website or by any other means other than creating and paying for their own account. It's a paid service. They can have a private account, but through our library branches, they can have free access. So I'm going to share a screen with you real quickly that will show you what this looks like when they see this. Let me take a look here real quick, make sure I'm sharing the right screen with you all. Yes, I am. Okay. So this is what they will see. The reason that it would be meaningful for you all to see this is if you have someone calling or asking questions in the vein of, I can't access Ancestry Library Edition, or I can't get on Ancestry, I'm having trouble, it keeps asking for a username or password. Or if they come to the desk and they say, it's asking me to sign in, it's asking me to create an account, that sort of thing, excuse me, then that's the sort of thing that would sort of tip you off that maybe it's not recognizing your computer, or if they're calling, if they're talking about accessing it from home, would give you the information that you need to let them know, hey, you have to be at the library to use Ancestry Library Edition. If they're coming to the desk and they are on one of your machines, one of your public internet machines, and you go and verify that, yes, indeed, they can't get access to it, then that's something that you need to let me know, because something has gone wrong with the way it is recognizing the public machines, and I need to get that fixed as quickly as possible. So with that shown, I'm going to now share another screen with you that will be what they will see in our libraries when it is working the right way. So this is Ancestry Library Edition the way it should be showing to our patrons. The first thing you'll notice is up in the top right, it says Trails Regional Library, Missouri. So you know that you're logged in. Again, if anybody is having issues accessing it, that's one of the first things you need to look for. If that's not there, something else that will be in that spot is a place for people to put in a username or password, or in some cases I've seen where there is an ad there or a link for them to start a paid account. Again, this is a paid service, but we subsidize it for our patrons, but they only can use it in our branches. Okay, now that that's clear, let's talk a little bit about what Ancestry is. Ancestry is essentially a database of historical documents with the designed purpose of locating your ancestors, your family, to fill out your family tree. It is a combination of a variety of records. Some of them are listed right here. You've got census records, vital statistics, birth, marriage, death records, things like that, military records, enlistment documents, discharge papers, things like that, immigration forms such as passenger manifestos for ships that were loading and unloading immigrants during various periods of our history. You can you can look through these individually if you have a feeling that you know what piece of this story you're trying to look for. But if you're just trying to trace a specific person, I think a lot of people are just going to start up here where it says search. Before I get to that, I do want to show you a couple of other things, though, because there's a couple of things that in this top navigation that are a little bit shorter, a little bit simpler that I want to show you, and then we'll get back to searching, because that's sort of the more complex aspect of this service. So first is the new collections over here on the far right. That is, let me make sure I've got my Zoom set. I don't. Okay, so excuse me. First thing over here on the right is new collections. That is something that is just going to show you things. For instance, if you are a veteran genealogist and you think that you've searched everything that they've got, they're consistently adding new records. So this would be a place that you could come and look and see, oh, I have family from West Yorkshire, and they were there between those dates. Then you can then search those records to try to find more information about your family. And as more documents are added, then you can continue to fill out your tree, or fill out even more information about the people in your family history. One thing that I will say about family histories, and I really haven't done a lot of this, but it appears that there's always little nuggets to be found here and there, but really what benefits someone is tenacity. You really have to stick with this search and really pay attention to the minute details in some of these records, because some of them are not like modern records. They're not as detailed. They're not as easy to read. And the way that they recorded things was different in, say, 1840 than it is in 2015. So you really have to kind of be in a mindset to do genealogy. Okay, so this is new collections. Next thing I want to show is charts and forms. So these are the sorts of things that would help you document what you're doing. Obviously, most people are familiar with what they're calling the ancestral chart. This is just a PDF. So if you wanted to save a copy of it to a thumb drive, you could. If you wanted to print it off and fill it out as you're doing your research, you can. I have not happened upon any forms on here. There may be some forms on here that are editable digitally, but I haven't found any. Everything that I've found is of the sort that you print and you write everything out manually. So I believe there are pieces of software that are, family tree software that will allow you to do a lot of this digitally and allow you to save it in a way that is maybe easier to edit, maybe easier to record and keep track of if you want to do it digitally. But as of right now, from what I can see from Ancestry, what they're providing is a lot of paper charts. So close this one. You can see there's a research calendar. Again, a lot of these are not necessarily standardized forms that are, they're not necessarily meant to document your findings as much as your process, which in some cases can be as important as what you've actually found, because it's going to be very important in some situations to remember not just what you found, but where you found it, what call number or microfilm, reel that you found it on, or what it might be. So these things, and again, indicative of that is the fact that results is really only one column in this form, in this research calendar. So you've got things like date, repository, call number, microfilm number, description of the source, time period, name searched, and the results. So again, this is something that as you are doing your research, this would be very useful to document your process, so that if days or weeks pass between sessions of searching, then you can come back to it with a fairly decent recall of what you did last time and where you left off, because it really can be kind of mind-boggling. And I'll show you some of the ways that it can be when we get into searching. Research extract is, and I don't necessarily need to go through all of these, but again, it's sort of a more detailed version of the research calendar. You can just give more information about what you searched, who you searched for, when you did it, and what you found, that sort of thing. Then you've also got correspondence records. I mean, this is the sort of thing that you might have in your office if you were wanting to document calls as they came in and calls that you made and things like that. But in this sense, it's designed for use while you are documenting your research. So family group sheet, source summaries, these are the sorts of things that you can find here. Also census forms. This is kind of interesting because as years passed, the forms changed. So these are sort of standardized forms that you can look at to see, okay, in 1940, it's just a blank copy of the census form. So you can see what they searched for. And I'll go ahead and zoom way in here so that you can see some of this stuff. So for instance, you've got line number, street, avenue, road, house number, number of household in order of visitation, home owned or rented, value of home if owned, monthly rental if rented, etc. So you've got all these columns that if you're doing a lot of research in, let's say, the 1940 census, you can maybe use this blank form to fill in some of that information as you are documenting it, so that if you just want to have a record of everything that you've searched without maybe printing off the original copies, or if you want it in your handwriting, I'll show you again as we're doing some searching that some of the census takers' handwriting is not the easiest to follow. But also, as you go back to something like the 1790 United States Federal Census, you can see that you don't have nearly as many fields. They didn't record as many things, and the things that they recorded are different. So you got county, city, page number, names of heads of families, free white males of 16 and upwards, including heads of families. So the word free there might indicate a slight change in the culture and the type of country that they were recording at the time. Free white males under 16, free white females, including heads of families, all other free persons, and yes, slaves. So you've got all of these different fields that were recorded at that time that you can, again, you can record in your own script, or you can record maybe something that appeared on, say, 15 pages on just one, because you're cutting out all of the people on those pages that you're not studying. So there's a variety of reasons why you might want these forms. Something else is that, for instance, the 1790 census form, maybe the pages that you find in here, even though they're scanned, they might be very, very old. It might be difficult to read them. Ancestry has actually done a pretty darn good job of deciphering this information and making it pretty darn accessible. So I will, and again, I'll show you that whenever we're doing our searching, but just in case you need more information about what was recorded in 1790 and you want that form to document things, then it's there. The Learning Center is actually really cool. If you're just getting started, you can go through some training. There are, again, right here, first steps. You can get some information about how to do your searches, how to document things, how specific records were recorded. There's codes in some of the records, and some of that you may need assistance with deciphering. Okay, in the heads of household, or in the, let's say, the birthplace column, it just has a code. It doesn't say the hospital. It doesn't say home. It says 6, or it says 10, or whatever, or it just says A or B. That there is a meaning there, obviously, but you may not know what it is. So these guides that they have will actually do a good job in showing you how to decipher some of that information. And this is, again, the first steps, and it shows you some of the things about starting with paper and pencil. And then there's apps, and there are things like Family Tree Maker that you can, I think Family Tree Maker might be free, but I'm not honestly sure. I don't think it's tied directly into Ancestry, but there are digital versions of Family Tree Makers out there that you can use. And then, of course, as you progress, as you are, more adept at using some of these records, then you go into your next steps, and you've got more advanced pieces of advice for how to search different things. They also have a social network, so you can get on here and connect with people that are either distant relatives or that have also done family history in either your family or the family of maybe a branch of your tree, so that maybe if they've done a lot of the work for you, you can get copies of those things, or you can see what they have done to maybe shorten or lighten your load a little bit. Message boards, again, very similar to any other message board. If you have a specific topic or question, you can post it in here and get answers from people who are maybe more experienced. So those are the rest of this navigation up here. Now we're going to get into the searching. If you want to search a specific type of document or a specific type of record, you can certainly, kind of narrow your search down into one of those things. But I think a lot of people who are just starting are going to be going into all categories. And so this is what you're presented with. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. The way that you use Ancestry is really pretty straightforward. It's pretty self-explanatory. You're searching for people, so you're going to need information like names, where they lived, when they were born, if they're no longer with us, when they died, did they have kids, who were they married to, what were their siblings' names, things like that. The first search terms obviously are right here, but you also have additional search terms that you can narrow things down by adding in father, mother, sibling, spouse, adding in events, when were they married, where did they live, what was their gender, race, nationality. And you can also narrow what you're actually searching. Do you want only photos and maps? Do you want family trees? Do you want stories and publications? Things like that. So just to start off with, something else that you can also look into from here, if you, again, want to narrow your search down into other categories, there are special collections over here on the right, and you can also narrow by region. So if you are starting off, this is an American resource that is designed to assist people in America with at least the starting segment of their research. There are immigrant records, and there are records from Europe, but the bulk of the documentation that is available through Ancestry Library Edition is available from the United States. The documentation was created and is about United States citizens. So obviously, narrowing your region can be done by state, excuse me, or you can click on something on the map just to show you kind of what that looks like. You can click on Missouri and you can see specific types of records that are here. You've got your census and voter lists. You've got birth, marriage, and death, which would be your vital records. You've got your military records, immigration and travel. Then they have some maybe more unique things that are things like, newspapers and publications, pictures, school and church histories, and directories, wills, probates, land tax, Missouri reference dictionaries and almanacs, Missouri maps, atlases, and gazetteers. A lot of you in your branches have a local history section. These are the kinds of things that I'm sure you already have and have seen and may very well have already helped people look through, but some of them are here. I would also encourage you, if you haven't yet, to go to archive.org. That is a free resource for a variety of resources, but one thing that has really flourished there is local histories, because most of them are in the public domain. They are out of copyright. So archive.org actually has a lot of local histories. I know from my time in Lexington, they've got some Lafayette County books that people that had family around Lexington or around Lafayette County might have had family there, but now they live in wherever, New York, California, somewhere far away where they can't really make it here to see some of those local history documents. Archive.org is another good source to point them to get to some of those documents, some of those local histories, family histories, things like that might be or might have been 15, 20 years ago, rather difficult to come by, other than calling local libraries and getting photocopies, or getting, if you're lucky, a copy of it maybe sent through the mail to their local library through interlibrary loan, something like that. Now they can search it online. And not only can they see it online, but they can actually search it using archive.org. So again, you can narrow it yet further over here on the right by going into your county, looking at something like Buchanan County, which has a lot of these different types of documents. You can see, again, they've got a lot of the same stuff. It is vital records. So you've got your birth, marriage, death, Buchanan County, Missouri marriages, 1839 to 55. But then you've got things that, again, are more unique to that area and are probably not in Ancestry for a lot of other counties. Things like school directory, school documentation, directories of, in some cases, like maybe local clubs, things like that would have a roll of their members, church histories, things like that, wills, probates, again, and then local history that, again, is pretty unique to a specific area. Okay, so then we're going to go back and actually do a little bit of searching. So when I was brushing up on my skills, getting ready to do this, I just started looking at my grandfather, because some of you may know he recently passed away. So it was something that I was kind of interested in tracing down. And I'm just going to put in Livingston County because I know that they moved around a little bit. They lived in rural areas, so may not be in a specific town. So I'm going to look at Livingston County, and I know he was born in 1930. Each one of these has an exact thing that pops up whenever you fill in the field, and I'll show you on the next page, whenever we look at our search results, what that does. You can change it here, but I'll show you there's some sliders on the next. I think it's a little bit easier to look at it visually on the next page. So put in your information. If you have more information about your person, obviously you can put more information in there. But something else to mention, what I wanted to show you about the exact checkbox on the previous page is that you see these filters here over on the the left-hand side. You go from broad on the left and exact on the right. So for instance, his name, I know his name, but if it's somebody from 100, 150 years ago, maybe I didn't know their name. Maybe it's abbreviated. Maybe I only know it's JF Constant or something like that. I don't know exactly what his name is. So I might want to do a broad search for initials, but you can move it in steps and it shows you what those steps do. So for instance, here it's just very, very broad. It's going to search for just about anything that's even close to Jack, including initials and things like that. Move it in a step and it's going to say, okay, exact. It'll find things that are exact. It'll find things that are similar, things that sound like, and initials. Move it in one more. Exact, sounds like, and similar. So it removed initials. Move it in one more. Exact and similar. So it got rid of sounds like. And then all the way in is exact. So for instance, from what I've found, we never really had much variation in our surname. we, as far back as I could find, we were constant. We didn't, a lot of people, when they came here from the old country, they might have changed their surname to something else for whatever reason. They needed a new start, or whatever. There's a variety of reasons, but as far as I know, we never had that. So I'm going to say, okay, exact is okay for my surname. Born, again, if I didn't know, then I could leave it broad, but as you move in, it gets more specific. So plus or minus 10 years, plus or minus 5, 2, 1, or exact. I'm just going to leave that broad. And then Livingston County, again, broad just shows you anybody that's in the database. Narrowing it down a little bit will narrow it to country, state and adjacent states, state, county and adjacent counties, or exact. Okay. So these are things that you can use to narrow. So you can see some of the categories down here below where you can see the number of records that are here. So if I go to exact with the last name and the county and I update it, you can see it dramatically reduces the number of documents and records in those search results. So if you're wanting to narrow things down, the more sure you are of something, the more you can kind of move this in. And if I want to say, okay, I know that there's a couple of Jacks that are around that year, but I'm sure within a couple of years that he was born in 1930. Again, that took off a few other records on there. There were, 3 census and voter lists. Excuse me. There were 7. Now there's 4. So there were 3 census and voter list records, that were removed whenever I made that born date more specific. So something that I do want to mention is that in census records, you can see the first record here is a 1940 census record. And this is my grandfather. And he was 9 at the time. Says he was born in 1931, but that funny thing about records back then, my grandpa actually didn't know exactly what his birthday was his entire life. He wasn't positive when he was born. He was born at home, and according to different documents, he was born on different days. So, and it says, of course, about, because all they recorded then, they didn't record dates of birth. They just recorded ages. So he was 9 when they took this census. And so they say he was born about in 1931. But as it turns out, he just hadn't turned 10 yet. But anyway, what I was getting at in 1940, in showing you the 1940 census, is that there is a 72-year privacy restriction on federal census documents. So 1940 is the most recent census that you can find in an online form as far as the specific documentation for privacy reasons. You can go to like American Fact Finder or something like that and get demographic information. You can get population statistics, number of people of a certain kind of education, and things like that. You can get general information about an area, but you can't get the specific form any more recently than 1940, because there's a 72-year restriction on that. So the next time we'll have a new census form released will be the 1950 census, and that will be in 2022. When that is 72 years old. So something else that I want to show you that though that is a restriction on census records, Ancestry does pull in other documents. So for instance, they have the Find a Grave Index. And again, my grandfather recently passed away, but they've got documentation of his obituary and where he was laid to rest and when he died and things like that. You can go to their website and see some of this information. But again, this is not Ancestry information. It's just documentation that they have in Ancestry. So it's available there, and you've got records there that can help you find some people, but they're not necessarily official documents. And I suppose in that vein, it's also important to note that none of these are really generated by Ancestry. Ancestry is just collecting them, and it's just a database of these vital records or census data and things like that. So let's look at this census record, because these are some of the more valuable records, I think, in here, because they do exactly what we're trying to do, which is they tracked information about people, and that's what we're trying to find out about when we're searching in Ancestry. So finding things out about who a person is, and in this case, again, this is my grandfather. He was 9. It says about when he was born. You've got some information here. A lot of this information is things that you could glean directly from the form, but they've done a pretty good job of making sure that that it is in a easily digestible format here on the page itself. And then you've got your household members down at the bottom. Each one of these is a link, so you can actually look at the same information about them from this same record. So for instance, his father, James Constant, you can look and see, so, relation to the head of house, he is the head of the house. He was about 45. He was born about, so therefore he was born about 1895. Again, they just recorded ages. They didn't record dates of birth, so they can only give you an about. So this is why it might be a good idea to leave some of those search terms a little bit more vague whenever you go further back in history, because again, it's not a precise science, a lot of this stuff. So you've got more information about him because he's the head of the house. He's not a 9-year-old. He's the head of the house. So he's likely the person that is giving all of this information to the census taker. So he's got things like, yes, he's on a farm. His occupation is he is a farmer. Residence in 1935 was the same house. Value of home or monthly rental if rented. He did own, so I'm guessing that's in dollars. So in 1940 it was worth $800. Highest grade completed would have been 8th grade, etc. So you've got other sorts of things, all sorts of things in here that you can discern about the family. Something that I do want to show you is that, and maybe it would be better to go back to Jack, and you can actually look directly at the form itself. And something that I think is actually pretty darn cool that they do is on the form itself, you can see as I'm moving up and down, it's highlighting the row that I'm on. And if I hover, it's showing me the information. Not only does it show me what is filled out there in a readable format, because oftentimes the script of, maybe not in 1940, but go back to maybe 1790, and the script is a little difficult to read. So for instance, it not only gives you what it says, but it also gives you the field that it's in. So this is name. So as you're going down, relation to head of house is daughter, gender is female, race is white. So as you're going through, it tells you, not only does it say Missouri, so maybe you can see Missouri, but you don't know exactly what the field is, because let's say that you're zoomed way in. So you're following this record. And again, something else that's really neat that they do is they leave the names, even though I have scrolled to the right farther to where I can't see on the form the names. They have left the names over here in this sidebar so that I can tell what row I'm in, which is a pretty neat thing that they've done here with these records, because some of these things are, even zoomed in, you can, I know that it says yes there, but that's pretty difficult to read. Again, residence 1935 code. I don't know what that code means. That's one of those things that, going online and going through maybe some of their training, or going to the message boards and talking to an expert and saying, okay, I see this residence code in 1935. What does this mean? What does XOV2 mean? I don't have any idea what that might mean. Okay, employed for pay, no. So anyway, this is the sort of general thing that it does. But then also, excuse me, it outlines the household in green of the person that you've searched for, and then the actual person in yellow. Again, which I think is something that you could certainly figure all of this out without it. But boy, does it make things a lot easier that they have done that. And again, even though I can hover and it says income other sources, yes, the fields are also right up here where it says income other, income, weeks worked, code F. Again, just indicative of some of the changes in time. Weeks worked in 1939, 12. Weeks worked in 1939, 52. Weeks worked in 1939, 52. So the kinds of things, it kind of gives you an idea of the kinds of things they were tracking, the kinds of things that they felt were important at that time. So in 1940, yeah, it probably would have been important to know, are people working? Are they of working age? Are they seeking work? That may not be on this particular census, but I did see, yeah, there it is. So in 1940, you can see employed for pay, yes. Public emergency at work, no. Seeking work, no. Employment history, no. Employment details, no. So even though this is head of house, he's a farmer, so a lot of this information is either not there, or it could entirely be that he just said, there isn't any because I've always been a farmer, or it's possible that information just wasn't given. So you've got down here, you've got Helen, the oldest daughter. No, she's not employed, but yes, she's seeking. So then you get into the younger kids, and no, they're not seeking employment because they're younger. But anyway, it is a nice thing that they have done here to make these records a little bit easier to track. There are tools here that you can also use if you need to view these in a different way. You can rotate them left or right. You can flip them. You can invert the colors. Let's say that, for instance, you have vision impairment of a certain sort, and it's easier for you to see white on black instead of black on white. Then you can do that. And it's a little bit harder to see the highlights then. But again, if you have a vision impairment, or if you are just spending a lot of time in darkened rooms looking at computer screens, maybe for you this is easier on your eyes. But these are the sorts of things that it allows you to do. Again, you could get by without these things, but it's kind of nice to know that they're there. You can print this. You can download it if you just want to save a copy of it. And then let's see. Let's go back out. Excuse me. And see. Again, those forms I was showing you earlier, the 1940 census form, you can view the blank form here. And you can see what they would have filled out. Now, that's a little bit different than what they were presenting as the 1940 census form in the, let's say, the documentation area of Ancestry. This is probably a little bit closer to what the original form looked like, rather than a form that is to be used as documentation. I just realized I'm only sharing the window, and you guys probably aren't seeing that form. But anyway, that form looked a little bit more like what the original form would have looked like. I won't go down too far into the rabbit hole of my family history, but I will share a couple of things with you. James Constant would have been my great-grandfather. And when I was looking for him to trace further back, I did find more information about him. But what I found was that In this record, he goes by James. In a previous record, he went by Harvey. And as it turns out, his name was Harvey James. And so in previous documents, I needed to actually search for a Harvey constant because in earlier census records, he's listed as Harvey. So that's what I mean whenever I say you need a little bit of tenacity and a little bit of it's sort of a logic puzzle in some ways. You kind of have to think, okay, what about this person would have changed? Their date of birth probably is going to be, again, you can make it general. Their date of birth, or at least their year of birth, is going to be fairly similar to what is listed here because they're listing their age, and we know that the year that it's being taken. So it's going to be pretty close to 1895. Might not be exact, but that's going to be pretty close. But hey, you know, maybe he says his name is James in 1940, and maybe in 1930 he's going by Harvey. And as it turns out, I think if I'm correct, I think if not 1930 and 1920 in the census, he does go by Harvey. And you can trace these folks back. In fact, in his case, I believe in 1920, you could see that the household is very different, obviously, because he's much younger. We're going to say 1895 here. And so we have Harvey Constant from, now here's a family tree. I actually didn't see this one, but parent would be Nana Constant. And I actually know that that is true because I tracked him down to some other census records. So here you can see when he's 25, Harvey J. Constant. Other members of the household, Nanny would be his mom, 45. So when his mom was 45, he was 25. He was still living at home with her and was going by Harvey J. So when he went out on his own, he started going by James. So, you know, again, kind of sort of some Byzantine changes, and you start seeing things, excuse me, things like this, like birthplace of father, tongue of father, birthplace of mother, tongue of mother, things like this whenever people were immigrating maybe more heavily or moving from place to place more heavily before they had gotten settled, that weren't on, say, the 1940 census. And maybe it wasn't as important to track people as they moved from state to state or county to county, etc. But these things, these kinds of things are really useful, especially if you're trying to, you know, then from here, track down Nanny Constant. And again, she's the head of household in this scenario, but you go back far enough, and then when she's not the head of household, then, you know, in some cases, women were not tracked in the same way that men were. And so it's important, you know, at this point, it's just Harvey and Nanny, but you're going to have to find what was his dad's name. And because at a certain point, that's going to be the head of the household, and that's going to be the record that it will be more likely for you to find. So anyway, and you know, just some other things that I found as I was going back through that you might turn up as you're helping patrons. You know, a lot of things can happen in 10 years. You know, I found a section where it appeared that an entire family had been started and the patriarch had died in those 10 years. So you have, you know, a family of maybe 6 kids, but you never, in the census, you never see who that patriarch was, because a lot can happen in 10 years, especially in those days. So you've got an entire family being created and the patriarch passing away within those 10 years. So you've got to trace them in different ways. And that's where the vital records are important. You know, then you can look for marriage certificates, birth certificates, things like that, which, again, many of those things are also in Ancestry. Again, I could keep going back through this. And, and as I told somebody yesterday, as I was going through this, back before I started going down my own personal family history. I sort of looked at genealogy and genealogists, um, sort of askance, and kind of like, why would you spend so much time going through all of this stuff? Now that, I've had family that are no longer with us, and I've got children of my own, and I'm reaching a certain age, I actually found this stuff pretty fascinating. And so I traced back quite a ways. I might actually be a son of the American Revolution. I'm not sure. But it looks like there were at least some constants here before America was America. So that was kind of a neat thing to see. But anyway, that is the basics of Ancestry Library Edition. If you have questions or you have issues with patrons that I haven't covered here, please feel free to give me a call. Let me know if we need to cover other things in subsequent training or subsequent online editions of our training. Let me know, and I will try to cover those as best I can. Let me do a quick search and see. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you very much for coming, and I will see you next time.